welcome to Chop the Rock, Little Rock's newest cooking show featuring our great friends throughout the community. I'm Diana Long with the Little Rock River Market, and my special guest chef today is Kelli Marks of Sweet Love Bakes. Thanks for joining us today, Kelli.
Thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited about what we're going to do.
I'm very excited about what we're going to do. And this came about in a new partnership that you have with guys at Canvas, which is the restaurant in the Arkansas Art Center. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I had a brick and mortar shop for 4 years and I closed it, and I continued to bake because I just love it so much. I was still baking out of my house, and there are some things that you can't do. Arkansas has some very lenient cottage laws,
Right.
so there's a lot that you can do out of your house, but legally there are some things you can't sell wholesale. Like I could sell to you and that's
Right.
fine, but this partnership with Canvas, I couldn't do that from my house.
You can't do cream cheese, like
And
anything
exactly.
with cream cheese from your house
Right.
either, so it's part of those laws, so that's right.
Yeah. So got a conversation going on Facebook, and Brian Kearns pops in and says, you know, I can help you with that. He's like, I've got a lot of space in my warehouse at Simply the Best.
Oh,
We would love to have you. And so we started talking, and they got me a little corner. I've got an oven and a mixer. It's really all I need. And through that, I offered to do the desserts for Canvas. So just thought it would be a really fun, new, different way, because with the shop, you know, it was more cupcakes and a lot of custom cakes. So now I'm really trying to kind of branch out, do more plated desserts, a little more interesting things that I didn't get to do when I had my shop.
And you get to be more creative because the desserts that you're doing for Canvas are all based on works of art that you can find at the Arkansas Art Center, which has got to be really cool and very inspirational sometimes.
It's really neat. I walked through and I was like, oh my gosh, like all of this could be cake. You know, you look at a painting and you're like, I could do that in buttercream. And you know, some of the other things that are molded and the non-traditional artwork that they have, you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I could make that into something. There was a gorgeous piece that was there this past fall that was a non-traditional, and I actually turned it into a bread pudding, and it was in a bowl of salted caramel. It was really gorgeous. I'm sure
Like
we
I'm
can
feeling the
show it.
calories just hearing you describe that dessert.
Yes, but there's so many things when you walk through an art gallery. It's very easy to get inspired.
Yes.
And for me, honestly, it kind of takes me back because I came into cake decorating through art. I took a lot of art classes when I was in high school. I took AP art, so I've always drawn. And for me, it was more about artistic expression through food than creating food that happens to be pretty.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this is really fun. It started out with my grandparents. Their 50th anniversary. They wanted to have a really big party and just go all out. And I thought it would be fun to make the cake for them. So I had never done anything like that before. So I sat down in Barnes & Noble and started reading a book. Ended up, I left with the book and
A cake decorating
decorating book.
Okay.
And from the point when they kind of mentioned it in the spring until September when they had their party, I just practiced and taught myself out of this book and ended up doing a 4-tier cake where everything was made from scratch. The cake, the buttercream, the fondant, the royal icing, I hand painted all of it and ended up with this 4-tier cake that fed almost 200 people. And when I finished, I was like, oh yeah.
This is what I want.
I like
my
this.
days
I
doing,
love it.
right.
And so it was just a hobby, and I was doing cakes for friends, and then it became friends of friends. And after a while, I had complete strangers who were showing up at my house picking up cakes. And I
Right.
thought, maybe there's something here.
Right.
So that's when I opened Sweet Love.
That is so cool. I do recall everyone right before you opened Sweet Love working with different people who were having projects or different events, and it was, if you want the coolest cookies in town, you got to call Kelli Marks. That's the person to get the. And so everybody, I mean, you cookied yourself out of cookies.
I did over 4,000 iced sugar cookies for Children's Hospital.
Wow. I can't even imagine what that might look like in someone's kitchen.
It was insane. And there were delays getting my shop open, so I did that from my house.
Oh, wow.
With a double oven that I could bake 15 cookies at a time.
Nice. Nice. That's love right there. That
It
is
was.
sweet love. So, well, let's talk about, tell me, what are you going to make with us today? I'm really excited about all this chocolate and peanut butter and
Yes.
cream cheese I see out here.
So this is a chocolate peanut butter mousse, kind of a bomb that I've got, and it's just a really basic recipe where you start out with cream cheese and then any kind of a spread. So you could do peanut butter, Nutella, Biscoff, any of that will work with this that I'm about to do.
Okay.
So instead I've got peanut butter and then I've added a little bit of cocoa so we get both flavors in there. So it's really fun.
If someone wanted to make this from home, they could get all of these ingredients pretty easily, right?
Yes, the only thing that I even have to order specialty at all are my sprinkles, but you could just pick something else.
You could just use any sprinkles. Okay, cool. Well, let's get going.
All right, so we're gonna start out by making the whipped cream. So I've got a little over a cup of heavy cream here. Just gonna get that going. Once it starts to get some peaks on it, I'm gonna add my powdered sugar.
Okay. So you ease that up to high speed, and about how long does that usually take?
It's gonna take about a minute or so.
Okay.
My newest favorite trick is an immersion blender. You just
That
drop
goes-
that in there, you can have whipped cream in 20 seconds.
Really?
Yeah, I forgot to bring it, but it's fun.
Okay, cool. So that's a good tip if you're making whipped cream at home to do that a little bit faster.
Yeah.
And maybe not have, that's a really easy thing to rinse off, and you can mix
Exactly.
it in the bowl that you're going to use instead of going through the whole cleaning up of your KitchenAid mixer.
Yep.
Good deal.
We're kind of getting there.
So I've got to peek over.
So you can see it's just getting a little thicker.
So we just have a couple of more seconds there. Canvas is open throughout the week
Yes.
and then on the weekends as well.
Yes, they are open Tuesday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then Saturday and Sunday, they're open from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., which makes them a really great brunch spot.
Oh, great.
And then they do actually specialty, like big spreads for Mother's Day and Easter. So I did like 800 pieces of dessert for them for those two events.
wow.
It was
Wow.
crazy. There was tons. It was gorgeous setup there, this huge floral arrangement. So really beautiful. So it,
Let's see. Let's show them
So-
what that is, like light and fluffy.
oh yeah. And I'm just going to reuse this bowl because this is going to end up right back in here anyway.
Right, okay.
So what we're going to start with is our 8 ounces of cream cheese. So just one package. And you kind of want it to come to room temperature, just a little bit soft so that it's going to whip.
So let it out.
Yeah.
Leave it out just a little bit before you prep.
Yeah, if you try to go cold, you're going to get really clumpy. And
Right.
It's not
it
going to be as
won't
pretty.
Mix well,
Yeah.
okay.
So I'm just going to let this go for a couple of seconds, then I'm going to add my other ingredients.
Okay. The one thing that I got from my grandmother's kitchen was her KitchenAid mixer, like the original before they became popular again, 1960-ish
That's
KitchenAid
awesome.
mixer. It's super cool.
That is cool. My grandmother gave me all of her old, I did not know this for a really long time, but both of my grandmothers decorated wedding cakes. Back in the day, it used to be you just had the lady from church do your wedding cakes.
Yeah, yeah.
And both of my grandmothers were the wedding cake ladies. I had no idea.
That's funny. So that genetically that
It's
came
there.
down to you.
Yes.
I had a grandmother that was the cake lady in town that made the cakes and did the decorating, and a couple of my aunts learned from her, but I completely missed that one.
Now I'm just
and
going
this-
to add, this is a cup of creamy peanut butter.
1 cup of creamy peanut butter. And is it best to use just a standard peanut butter? I know that right now a lot of natural peanut butter is kind of the thing, and there's some that's the no stir kind, and
Yeah.
some that's
You know, it really, I think, is going to be fine either way. If you use some of the natural, it's going to be a little less sweet, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. We've got a
Right.
lot of sugar and stuff going in here, so it's not going to hurt it if you are a little light on the sugar.
Okay.
If you are using any of the naturals, just make sure and do give it a good stir so you've got all the oil in it and it's incorporated prior to mixing with the rest of the ingredients.
Okay, and so then you added the cocoa, which is just your standard, find it at the grocery store cocoa. About how much was that?
That was half a cup.
Half a cup of cocoa.
I just used a regular milk chocolate, but if you wanted, you could use like a dark chocolate, like a Dutch cocoa. If you do that, you want to pull back and use just a little bit less. And then I've also got about a teaspoon of salt in there. It's very important. A lot of people forget, salt your desserts. You want to add that bit of salt because it's going to help counter all the sweetness that you're putting into it.
You know, something that I always thought was interesting about baking is that, you know, when you're cooking, it's really flexible, but baking is more of a scientific thing until you get down to the decorating part, right? So if it says sift this or don't sift that, you really do need to be careful that you're following the directions.
Every single recipe that I use has some salt in it.
Okay.
It's going to make your chocolate chips and your chocolate chip cookies, it's going to make that pop a little bit more. And a lot of these, like with frosting, it's nothing but a lot of sugar and some butter.
Really
so you
sweet.
need all that salt in there to help counter it and keep it from being so cloying.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we've got that, and right now it kind of looks like a clumpy little mixture.
It does.
But we're just going to add in this whipped cream. And I'm just going to finish folding it by hand. You could you can use the mixer if you like, but this is going to help keep from deflating that whipped cream just a little bit.
Right, because it's much gentler, so it keeps what you're going to come out with will be a little bit more fluffy than if you put it in the mixer again. Okay.
So what I have here is a silicone mold, and you can get these all over the place. Some of your specialty shops, we've got some local ones that you can find them, or just get on the internet and search.
Oh yeah, they're super popular anymore and very easy as far as cleanup. And you know, if you're putting something like this in here, I know if you were to use a regular like muffin tin or some other kind of pan, then you're going to have to line it or put some sort of non-stick, and then sometimes that doesn't work like it's supposed to exactly. So these make it really easy to pop these things out and keep their shape, right?
Yeah, and it's going to give us a really fun shape. This one is a stone mold, so it's got this little lip on it, so whenever we pop it out, it's going to be curved on the underside as well.
Great.
I actually bought a lot of these because I used them for Tabriz this year.
Gotcha.
And I had to do 350 plated desserts.
Oh wow, okay.
So
that is a lot of those. There are 8 on the page, so let's see. I don't math, so we don't want to do that part.
No, I bought enough that I could make at least 100 at a time and then reuse them.
Right.
So what I've got here is just a pastry bag that I've fitted with a little tip. It's not necessary, but it's going to help get all of the mousse in there a little bit easier, a little bit cleaner.
So if you're working from home and you don't have a fancy pastry bag, I've used like a Ziploc bag and cut the tip off of the end, and I do it like that. It makes it a whole lot easier. So you don't have to have all of these necessarily professional pastry bags.
There are some things that I tell people are key and you've got to have them, and then there are other stuff that you can cut corners, you can use, just things that you've got around your house. You know, for instance, with these, you know, if you didn't want to use this really neat little silicone mold, you could put it into like a cup or some sort of a disposable and cut it out.
Oh, like a cupcake tin type deal. Gotcha.
So I'm going to pipe this, and then we're just going to set that aside. I'm going to have you. So the other little thing that's in this, not just mousse, is some cake. So this is my chocolate cake. I've already baked it this morning.
This is a thin sheet cake, almost like a little thinner than brownies, right?
It's very thin. We don't want it super thick. We're just adding a little bit. And I've lined the bottom of the pan with parchment so that it's going to peel up easily and not stick to the bottom. So we just want to cut. I've got this circle cutter that fits really nicely inside there. So I'm just going to give you some gloves because this is a really sticky chocolate cake.
Yes, okay, perfect.
So if you'll cut those out. and I'm just going to pipe this in here.
And at home, could you, just use any chocolate cake? I mean, you could slice something thin if you can't bake it this thin.
Yeah. A little tip that I've picked up baking, you can actually freeze cake batter. So if you wanted to just bake a little bit, even if you just made a box mix and you bake just a little bit of it, you can save the rest, just put it in a container in the freezer, and then whenever you're ready to use it again, pull it out, let it come to room temp, bake it, fresh cake, that you didn't have to mess anything up.
From the batter. So
Yes.
I've heard of people freezing an actual cake, like you wrap it up really good, it won't dry out. But that takes up a lot of space. So you could put in, if you just wanted to do a half of a recipe. Oh, I had no idea. What a great idea.
I love it because it's a great way. If you just get a little sweet tooth, maybe you're single, you don't want to bake an entire cake, you can pre-portion it for cupcake sizes, stick it in the freezer, and then just pull out the 1 cupcake worth, bake them off. I do that with brownies, and then we just eat them warm with ice cream all the time.
What a great idea. So see, there you go. You don't have to cook for a dozen people. If you want to bake something, you can customize that just for a couple. That's a great tip. So let's talk a little bit while we're doing this. This is a very sticky cake here.
It
is. So is it gonna, am I messing it up?
No, you're totally fine.
Okay, cool.
That's what makes it delicious. So I'm just kind of knocking this down into the mold to make sure it gets down in there. And then we're just gonna tap these right in. And I'm just gonna kind of squish them in. Okay. And there, it's sticking to my gloves because like I said, it's a really sticky cake. Sometimes I'll put it in the freezer
that's a good
let
idea.
it get cool, and that'll help it from getting everywhere.
All right, let's see if I
Go
can
ahead.
help you. And I only did 8 of them
Perfect.
since we have.
That's how many we have. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the Art Center. The Art Center is so much more than just art exhibits. They have some really cool things that they offer there, including art classes from everything from drawing and painting to printmaking.
Yes.
So you can take classes there. Is that a summer program, or is that throughout the year?
It's throughout the year. I actually have a good friend of mine who takes pottery classes there, and she's gotten amazing. She's always talking about raku and all kinds of stuff, and I'm sure listening to her is like listening to me talking about baking stuff. I'm like, that sounds good. I don't know what she's talking about, but it looks
beautiful.
Yeah, it looks beautiful, and she does amazing work.
Right,
so.
there you go. So that's great if you've got the time to do that. And I've looked through the schedule before. It seems to be very flexible. And not that expensive for folks who want to come out, because a lot of times when you pay the fee to be there, your materials are included just depending on what the class is, and they'll give you a full list of all the things that you need.
Right. They've got all kinds of different programs. It's a really great asset for our community, and I don't think people really think about it as much, what you can do and what you can go there and learn as well.
Right. I think it's really cool that they have everything from, like you said, pottery, painting, printmaking, glass work, which seems like something you would never do at home.
Yes, it seems like really daunting, but so cool if you could do something like that, and you can there.
Yeah, and jewelry making. So many people make their own jewelry anymore, and you can take classes that would be from a novice skill level all the way up to someone who's got a much higher skill level. So you don't really have to worry too much about maybe feeling a little bit inadequate or uncomfortable when you go into a class because they're teaching way above your head. So it really is targeted to reach just about everybody in the community. And they even have really great programs for kids too.
I was going to say they did a really cute little tea party recently, and so I made some cookies for that, and they had a whole little program for the children.
Oh, good. And they have a children's theater where they do various productions throughout the year, and the kids can come out and enjoy that too. So there's just so much more at the Art Center than just art.
Yes.
It's important, yeah.
So the next step for this dessert is going to be the glaze that we're going to pour over. So we put those into the freezer,
Right.
and they need to sit there a couple of hours until it gets good and firm. Usually I leave them overnight, so I'll pick back up in the morning with
Gotcha.
this.
Okay.
But I've already got some, so that are already frozen. You know.
Auto magically.
Magic. So what this has here is it's got 2 cups of chocolate, and I'm just using a semi-sweet chocolate chip.
Okay.
If you wanted to go with something a little darker, I really like a 60% cocoa. It's a little bit deeper. It's going to give you more of a bitterness, which will help counter some of the sweetness of the filling. But it's really, you know, kind of whatever you've got. Chips are fine. I've got 2 tablespoons of butter and half a cup of corn syrup, and then I've got a little bit more corn syrup if it ends up it's not quite the right consistency.
And is the butter salted butter or unsalted butter?
Now, I know we talked about salt.
Right.
I always bake with unsalted butter so that you can control that salt.
Gotcha.
So,
because if you're salting and using salted butter, you could overdo it on the salt.
Absolutely.
Pretty easy. Okay, so that's something that's important at home when you're following these recipes, is to keep in mind use unsalted butter for baking. Okay.
So I'm going to pop this in the microwave, give it a couple of stirs, back in the microwave, and then we'll come back with some glaze.
So to not burn this when you put it in the microwave, it's like maybe a minute stir, a minute?
More like 30 seconds.
30
Start
seconds.
with 30 seconds, give it a stir.
Right, because you can always cook it longer, but you can't
undo those
and you don't want to burn your chocolate.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be right back with some melted chocolate.
Named one of 5 secret foodie cities by Forbes Travel Guide, Little Rock has a thriving artisanal food scene, great restaurants, and a growing number of craft breweries. Request a vacation planning kit at littlerock.com and see why we say dining is better with a Southern accent.
Okay, we're back, and we have melted the chocolate chips. And so, Kelly, you had a really good tip for that with regard to the consistency of the chocolate chips. We did 30 seconds at a time and stirred between.
Yes, and it took about 2 minutes.
Okay.
And so right there at the very end, if you still have some chocolate that isn't melted, just stir it, and the residual heat from the rest of it is going to melt that chocolate.
Right.
So
that way you don't burn the chocolate with that kind of
absolutely.
burned flavor.
And so I'm stirring it up. I've got just a couple more little lumps that I'm trying to get out. But overall, you can kind of see that it has a little bit, the texture, it has a tiny bit of a grittiness to it.
Right, it's not
so it's
silky.
not perfectly silky and smooth.
Okay.
So I'm just going to add a little bit more corn syrup to it.
So it's like a couple tablespoons at a time until it that's sliding.
Thanks.
So. And this is your clear corn syrup.
Yep, just good old basic light corn syrup here.
Gotcha, light, okay. Because corn syrup comes in light and dark.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I can see that smoothing out a little bit as you continue to stir that in.
Yes, and sometimes you can add a little bit of butter too. So the corn syrup is going to give this a viscosity, so the chocolate isn't going to set hard. So whenever we have the dessert, you can get a spoon through it as opposed to trying to break through like a candy bar.
Right? Or like the coating stuff that you pour over ice cream.
Yes,
it's not going to be hard
keeps it
like
from
that.
being that magic shell. The butter gives it, lets it set a little bit, but it's a soft set, and then this is that adds that viscosity. So I think that's going to do it for us. And what I've got over here is another piping bag, which again, we could just use a sandwich bag if we needed.
Right, and it is always easier to fill these things if
Oh
you
my
put them
gosh.
down into a cup
Yes.
or something else, and that way you don't have to have a kind of like an extra arm.
Right.
To
Well, because
hold
if
that
you
up
try
and
to
fill it
set
in.
it down and then it just kind of
Yeah, that's a
oozes
hot
back
mess
out.
waiting to happen right there.
Yes.
And so, and does this need to cool any? Is it going to affect, you know, because we've got our desserts are in the freezer, they've been setting, and so is this going to melt that a little bit? Is that okay?
It will melt it a tiny bit. If they've been in the freezer overnight, you're not going to have any problems.
Okay.
It'll be just fine. If you tried to go with a short version where you just let them in for an hour or two, then you might want to let this come down just a couple of
Just a little bit,
degrees. Just
okay.
let it bring down. So what I have here is just a little cooling rack. I've got some parchment underneath it so that I can throw all of the mess away. If you're actually really clean with it and you want, you can scrape that up, put it in your bag, and use it again. So we'll get those out of the freezer.
Okay.
And these are some that I made a couple of days ago and have already unmolded, so you can see how cute they are. They've got their little bit of cake on the bottom, and then we've got our cute little shape.
Well, they kind of look a little bit like a portobello mushroom.
See that? My cake is sticking to the bottom of my little container.
It's okay. It is sticky cake.
It is. Again, that's what makes it delicious. So now we're just going to take this bag, and if you will pass me the scissors. Thank you.
This is exactly what you would do if you had a large sandwich bag at home, is put this in, go ahead and seal the zipper on it, and then cut an edge out of the corner. And this, you cut a pretty small hole in that.
Yeah, I like to have a fair amount of control whenever.
Because you can always add more. You can't hardly, it's like you can't take it back off once it's out there. Okay.
So I put all of it into the bag because I can control that much. If you don't want, you can do smaller batches. But what I will do is hold this with my left hand and then give myself a small amount here with my right hand.
Yeah, so it doesn't get away from you.
And then you can just kind of give yourself more as you need. And I'm just gonna pipe it over the top. And you wanna kind of go around the sides.
Oh, wow.
And while that is going,
so I see what you're saying about the drip and how you could reuse that. It falls right through. So if you're making a lot of these and you don't want to have to remake the chocolate.
Right, because there's nothing wrong with that unless, you just keep an eye out some of these little crumbs that have fallen down. Try to keep the crumbs out of it.
Yeah, that would stop up your bag, right.
But all of that, it's still good chocolate.
Fantastic.
So we were talking earlier about the inspiration for some of these works. Right now, there is a really cool exhibit that's got a lot of like black and white pencil drawings.
Oh, yes.
Which I did tons of when I was in high school. It was just, we didn't have a lot of different mediums that we worked with, so we did a lot of pencil. And so this one is kind of loosely based off of that, just this really stark black and white art. And there's one in particular that I really love that they've got over there, and it's a Chicoya piece. It's really cool. It kind of reminds me of like a Banksy.
Oh, nice, nice. Is this, now I know that drawings are one of the featured styles in the permanent collection at the Art Center. So they do a lot of heavy focus on drawing and contemporary craft as part of their year-round exhibit, and then they bring in the traveling exhibits that come from museum to museum, which is a special opportunity to see some things that local people who don't travel out of state a lot would not necessarily have an opportunity to see.
Right.
So is this one of their permanent pieces? Do you know?
It is one of the permanent pieces.
Great, okay.
But I've learned quite a bit talking with them about the pieces and how some of this stuff works. They have a huge collection that, based on the type of artwork it is, there are certain restrictions as to how long those can be on exhibit and how much light is exposed to it.
Correct.
So, they may have a piece, but it's in storage because it's not allowed to be viewed at this time. So then they rotate them. So it's part of their permanent collection, but it gets rotated out as they're allowed to show them.
Right.
They had an O'Keeffe piece that was there recently, and they've got some pretty strict rules on those as well.
Gotcha.
And so it was really cool. I wanted to do one of those, do an inspiration piece. A lot of the new, like the galaxy trends of some of the mirror glazes. That's, I see the O'Keeffe and I'm thinking, I want to do a mirror glaze.
Right. When does this thing come out of storage? That's what I want to know.
Yes.
Right.
So what we're going to do next on this is I'm going to soften some white chocolate, and I've got another piping bag, and we're just going to finish these off with a little bit of the drizzle of white chocolate, and then you've got some sprinkles, and we will be done.
Great. So we'll be right back with some melted white chocolate.
Ranked among the nation's best value cities for travel and its most travel-worthy state capitals, Little Rock is known for its southern charm and hospitality. Request a vacation planning kit at littlerock.com and see why we say getaways are better with a southern accent.
All right, so we've melted the white chocolate, and that's just a touch of that. This is just really for decoration, right? Just to make them look pretty?
Yes.
You could put anything you wanted to on there then, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we could do, the brush and tips are really popular right now, so you could just pop a couple of buttercream flowers on top. It would be really pretty, and then this would kind of look, you know, like dirt.
Oh.
Kind of, you know, it would be like a little potted plant. You could do anything.
What a great idea for a garden party.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
So I'm just gonna give a couple of lines this way, and then a couple lines that way. And then I've got some chocolate and some white chocolate jimmies. And I just give a little bit of a little sprinkle right across the top. So we kind of get that contrast, that hard black and white like you get in some of those works of art.
Right, right. It very much looks like something that you would be able to draw with just a pencil or charcoal, that kind of thing. So we were talking about all the great exhibits and how much you've learned about the different art and artists and just the history of these pieces. But they've got docents. So if you're I can appreciate art, but I don't have an art history background, and so there's a lot of things that I think that make it more interesting if you can kind of get that educational component alongside it. But the Art Center offers that in a very casual way through their docents that are there on Saturdays and can give you a tour of the museum and maybe talk about the pieces. And of course, they also know which traveling exhibits are going to be coming in soon too, so they can help you decide when you might like to come back.
Yeah, it's a really great, again, I just can't say it enough. It's such a benefit for our community that people have no idea how much is there. You know, to be able to go and appreciate the art, but then learn about the art. You know, having someone explain to you, you know, about these pieces and the different things. It's been really fun. So I've enjoyed being able to have this partnership, doing different things like we did for the first menu. I wanted to do a French macaron, and instead of the smaller ones, we did one of the larger French macarons, and I kind of painted on it with royal icing on top from a Monet. I was like, it's Monet, I have to do something French.
Right, yeah. I think I saw the pictures of those, and they were absolutely fantastic.
They were
so
really
it just
fun.
Enhances the experience of the visitor to the museum who goes in to have lunch and has a dessert and says, I just saw this. How cool is this?
Absolutely.
That's very good.
All right, you ready to try?
Oh my gosh, yes. They have smelled, all this chocolate has smelled so amazing. So let's pop this one. We'll just split one if that's
sounds
okay.
Good. There we
Wow. Okay, so cheers.
Cheers. So you get all of that. We've got our little bit of cake right here, which is going to add a different texture to it. You've got the sprinkles that are going to give us a little bit of a crunch on top, and we've got the mousse and then the glaze.
That is incredibly good and so rich and creamy.
They look very small, but they are mighty.
You could not, right? Dynamite comes in small packages, and I'd say this hits that mark for sure. Very good, very good. I'm very excited to be trying this and learning how to make that. I feel so fancy right now.
Yes, and so, I mean, these are really basic techniques, but you just start stacking the different techniques, and you can create something that looks very impressive.
Right, and this isn't an all-day deal either. This is something that obviously it is better to put them in the freezer so you can kind of break it up into sections, but sometimes I think that people at home are like, oh, I would love to make this amazing meal, but I don't want to spend 4 hours on my feet in the kitchen and then be exhausted by the time people get here if they're hosting or something like that. And so, you know, this is one of those desserts that you can do that makes you, you're really going to impress your guests with that for sure.
And the first portion of it that we do with the cake and the mousse, and you get it molded, you could put that in the freezer for like a week.
Oh, wow.
And so then the day of your event, pull those out, pop this glaze on them, and then you've got an impressive dessert that we really didn't make a big mess with that step.
Right.
So you can do the other portions ahead of time, you know, and then that way you're not spending your whole day leading up to your event slaving away in the kitchen with this or making a mess or anything. So you'll have a good portion of it done.
Great. What a great thing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We hope everyone visits the Arkansas Art Center and takes time to stop into Canvas while you're there for some great food and some beautiful and tasty desserts.
Yes, as they say, eat your art out.
Eat your art out. I like it. Thanks, Kelly. I hope you join us for our next episode of Chop the Rock.